You say that capitalism is ending, and many people see an end as an absolute and almost sort of biblical termination, but you don't see it that way.
No, what it means is that you've got a system that just can't continue to operate in the way that it's been operating, and in technical language, the system bifurcates, which means there are two possible ways out into some new kind of system, and it's uncertain which of the ways it will go, and in fact that becomes, for a social system, the great political battle, deciding whether you want to push it in one direction or another. But what you know is it can't go on in the way that it used to go on. So at some point you can say it's no longer a capitalist system, it's something else. X. X is what we got to figure out. But
And do you think and you say it's bifurcating right now?
I think it's been bifurcating. Actually, it's been a process that's been going on for, I'd say 40 years already, and it may go on for another 40 years. I mean, the transition from one system to another is not an instantaneous phenomenon, and it's very confusing, because in some sense the old system is operating in the ways it always operated. It continues to operate in that way, but it fluctuates so wildly that it becomes totally unpredictable, and the fluctuations just make the whole thing worse from the point of view of how the old system operated. So at some point it kind of tilts, and that's the uncertain point. You don't know when that happens, but I mean, there's pressure to, if you think of it as a sort of fork, there's a pressure to one tine versus the other tine. And at some point it settles, and in the language of some analysts, this is bringing order out of chaos. The situation we're in the transition, is a chaotic situation, and a new order somehow gets settled on, and what that new order is intrinsically unpredictable, but you can affect it, the possibility of it moving in one direction or another direction.
Do you think that people's movements have a chance of making it something better than what it has been?
50-50. 50, I always say 50-50, that's a lot, not a little. I mean, the point is, what the systems analysts or the complexity scientists say is, there's no way anyone can predict how it'll come out, but it's because it's one of those situations in which every little action by every person at every moment affects the outcome, but at some point it pushes in one direction or the other. But since every little action by every person at every moment affects the outcome, in that sense you have a role to play. It's what I translate that into other language. I translate it into the old language of determinism and free will, and I say when a system's operating normally, it's pretty determinist, and what you do affects it very little. No matter how much you do, it affects it very little. But when a system is in structural crisis, which is what I'm claiming capitalism is at this moment, then we're in a situation which is free will. That is to say, everyone's action does affect the outcome, only you don't know, because there's such an infinity of actions by such an infinity of actors, and at each moment, that there's no way anyone could calculate in advance what will happen.
So all in all, you think it's going to be a very confusing next 40 years?
It's extremely confusing, and all you have to do is pick up a newspaper to see how confused people are. Okay, so I think, and it's intrinsically confusing because it's uncertain. People like to deal with certainty, and what I'm saying is it's completely uncertain what the outcome will be. But on the other hand, you started up by saying, do we have a chance? And I'm saying 50-50, and that's a lot.
And one of probably the most frustrating thing is watching the powerful of the world proceeding as if the world is as it has been for the past.
Well, some of them are. You see, that's the point. I think, the number of people who are ready to understand in their own heads that we're in a structural crisis and capitalism is going, away because it's not working anymore, and we have to choose. The number of people who have that in their conscious feelings is probably pretty small on both sides, you see. So, yeah, there are lots of people among the powerful of the world who think, well, somehow in a year or two we'll solve this problem and it'll look good again, and so forth. But there are people who realize, I think, that that's not true, and they've got to prepare for alternatives, and are preparing for alternatives, or are trying to push things in alternative directions. And I think that's true on the side of popular forces too. The number of people who are ready to say, yeah, we've got to push things in alternative directions, and this is what we might be able to do. There, it's a growing number. There are more this year than there were 2 or 3 years ago. I can tell you that.
You think so?
Well, generally speaking, a couple of years ago, if I talked of structural crisis of the capitalist world economy, people thought I was crazy. Basically, they're polite about it, but they thought I was crazy. And now it's being taken seriously. What's happened in the last year or two has shaken people in a way that what happened for 30 or 40 years before didn't shake people. And so they're not sure, or a lot of people are not sure. And so some are just hopeful that something will be done and somehow it'll be solved. But, I think there's more reflection now about the state of the world than there was a couple of years ago, and that's salutary. Okay?